What's up, everybody? It's the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. It is a Wednesday morning that feels like a Tuesday morning, and Tuesday morning felt like Monday morning after the long holiday weekend. It was a great week of podcasts last week with all the guests. I want to thank everybody for listening. So much sharing and listening, and it was one of the biggest weeks the podcast has ever had. I talked to Lou Holtz, I talked to Joe Lull, I talked to Scott Rabb on Saturday morning. It was just Rick Grayshock, former WFNYer. It was just a really great week, and I really appreciate everybody listening. This podcast is brought to you by Audible.com, audibletrial.com/WFNY, audibletrial.com/WFNY. You can get up to 180,000, not all at once. That'd be too much. I don't think your device can handle that many. They have over 180,000 books on tape, and it's not really tape, because books on tape are on tape. This is digital downloads, audiobooks, and jumpstart your reading by listening to books when you're driving, commuting, exercising, doing other chores, whatever it is you do. This is how I read so many books nowadays, is through audible.com. My wife and I love the service. audibletrial.com/WFNY. A few of you have already signed up, and I greatly appreciate that. So go check it out, give it a shot, and enrich your lives with books. That's all. So right now I need to talk about Mike Pettine, because there's a story that came across yesterday that we reported on Waiting for Next Year, and I think a lot of people were a little bit confused that we were maybe agreeing with the story. I know the way it hit our Facebook feed, it said, can't really blame them, meaning can't really blame Vegas for listing Mike Pettine as the favorite to lose his job, NFL coach to lose his job this season. And it's not so much, and I don't know exactly. I think Scott put that out there, and I don't want to know exactly what Scott meant, but I agree with what Scott wrote, that I don't know that I blame them. And that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with Mike Pettine. I think Mike Pettine is the best Browns coach since the beginning of Butch Davis, probably. I think he has the best demeanor. Stylistically, he seems like he's in control. Zach Jackson says it all the time, that Mike Pettine really seems like the adult in the room. And that's exactly the kind of guy I want leading the Browns. And in the same vein, he is a defensive guy, and it feels like the Browns' defense is their strength. It feels like he's good at coaching what he's supposed to be good at coaching, which is a far cry from many Browns coaches, but namely Pat Shurmur, who was supposed to be an offensive guy, and the Browns' offense was miserable, kind of miscast the entire strategy from the personnel he had. And so it's very strange that I would like Mike Pettine this much, but at the same time I agree with Vegas that maybe he should be the one who's favored to lose his job first. But that's just because it's the Browns. And I hate to go down with the old trope of only in Cleveland and Browns this, Browns that. I do think that they're more stable than they've been in a long time, and I don't think that they're going to fire Mike Pettine. But if I'm an outsider, if I'm in Vegas and I'm looking to line up bettors, if I'm looking to line up people to put their money down to bet on an outcome, of course the Cleveland Browns are going to be the obvious choice. Of course. You've got Washington, you've got a number of other options, but the Browns, until proven otherwise over a long period of time, are going to be considered the favorites to fire their coach. And that doesn't have a whole lot to do with Mike Pettine. It has more to do with everything that's happened before Mike Pettine. You know, he's the one where they get to prove that, oh, no, they're not just going to fire their coach if he struggles this year. And if you take into account the fact that the Browns bet on the fact that they bet on a bottom five quarterback to start their season in Josh McCown, which they did. I mean, you can say that Josh McCown's going to play better, or he's going to emulate the Chicago version of himself. But the Browns bet on a bottom five quarterback outperforming his history. That's what they did. You can't you can't look at Josh McCown and say that he should be somewhere in the middle of the pack of NFL quarterbacks. Not until the end of the year and he proves it. That is, and so, but the Browns did that. That was their strategy. The Browns also decided to bring a crew of running backs together, including their newest draft pick, and then trade one of their running backs, Terrence West, the week before the season starts. I mean, these aren't the kinds of moves. Look, Terrence West getting traded is probably a good thing. It's probably addition by subtraction. Sounds like he was not a very good teammate in the locker room. It sounds like he wasn't very coachable. And so it's probably the right move, but the timing and the way it sets up the head coach, the position it puts that head coach in, it's very reminiscent of the bad situation they put Pettine in last year. You know, with the texting situation and causing problems with his offensive coordinator, and I turned on Kyle Shanahan too. I didn't like Kyle Shanahan at the end, but there's no denying that the Browns and Ray Farmer kind of made life more difficult on Mike Pettine. I don't get the sense that Mike Pettine had great degrees of difficulty getting along with Kyle Shanahan. He knew that he needed to get along with that guy and make things work. And here was his front office texting down and interfering and really kind of injecting their negativity into his coaching staff and his team down on the field. And that kind of interference, that kind of distraction is what gets coaches fired, whether they deserve to be fired or not. Those are the kinds of things that cause coaches to have miserable seasons, that force organizations to react to fans who lose their mind over 4 and 5 win seasons. This is the history and culture that the Browns have built, and you can't deny it just because you hope it doesn't happen this time or you think that it won't happen this time. It might not happen this time, and I don't think Mike Pettine should be fired, but it's on the table. And it's more on the table in Cleveland than anywhere else because that's their track record. That's their MO. And it's going to take a while to live that down. And when you're asking people to put money down and bet on things, it's not up to you to predict the future. It's up to you to predict what people will put their money on to bet on. And people will bet on the Browns firing a head coach, generically speaking, until proven otherwise. And it's not like with their GM suspended for the first 4 games of the season, that it's not like the Browns have turned a corner and are the model franchise that everybody looks to at this point. Now, there might not be such a thing as a model franchise anyway. I mean, every franchise has problems, and I mean, Mike Shanahan Sr., do you think he's a good coach or a bad coach? I mean, generically speaking, I would say he's a good coach. But there he was in Washington with a team that traded away all their entire future for RG3, and he made some mistakes in putting RG3 back in the game, and he gets fired. But is that a Mike Shanahan problem or a Washington problem? If we were headed into this season and Mike Shanahan was still there, if he led the Vegas odds as coaches to get fired, would that say more about him or more about Washington? And that's really what I'm saying about Mike Pettine. Same with Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan gets let go by the Jets. Do you think the Jets have had a Rex Ryan problem for the last 7-8 years or whatever before they fired him since he's been in New York? Or do you think they've got a Jets problem and Rex Ryan was just the coach while they had many, many Jets problems? Was he drafting and bringing in players and doing all those other things? No. And so Rex Ryan leaves and he gets a job instantly with the Bills. And so if he had led the Vegas odds as coaches to get fired, would that have been, is that a reflection on Rex Ryan? My point is, I don't think it's a reflection necessarily on Mike Pettine. And I think a lot of the people on Facebook and in our comments thought that we felt like it was a reflection on Mike Pettine. And I don't know what Scott meant necessarily, but I'm going to speak for myself. I don't think it has much to do with Mike Pettine. Similarly, we posted the 911 call, which was really, really ugly. I guess I could probably play that here. I'm not sure that I really need to at this point. But Andy Moeller, the Browns offensive line coach, comes in this week and instantly gets suspended, and the Browns send out a press release. They handle their business actually very, very well. And so, all things considered, when you're faced with a situation where a coach comes in after a weekend, I'm trying to word this carefully, under investigation for assault, let's say. No charges have been filed or anything. But the Browns handled it well. They suspend a guy. And we had a comment on that post, and I think it's interesting. So I'm not calling anybody out. I'm bringing it up here. NJ0 posted, I know this runs counter to outrage culture, but should we really criticize the Browns because one of their employees apparently did something despicable? I can see getting upset if it comes out that this guy had a history of similar behavior that the Browns knew about, parentheses, or should have known about, and then just hired him anyway. Or if the Browns don't take appropriate action once the facts come out. When did it come to pass that we expect sports franchises or any company really to hire people that they know will never break the law? Perfect comment. I agree with it 100%. I don't really blame the Browns. I think they handled their business pretty well. They suspended him right away. But at the same time, this goes on the Cleveland Browns laundry list. Was it the Ravens' fault that Ray Rice punched his wife in the face? No. It was their fault for the way they handled it after the fact, which made it worse. But they still were. You're still the sum of the people that you hire, and it's not always going to be your fault. Any business owner will tell you your employees will make mistakes. They'll do things. They'll embarrass you from time to time, and it's not necessarily your fault. It's just when you operate the Cleveland Browns and these kinds of things happen continually while you also lose all the time, it's not fair. You're 100% right, NJ0. It's not fair, and the Browns maybe can't predict the future, but when you're an organization that loses on the field, that embarrassing things happen all the time, whether it's coaches texting or owners being under investigation, and then your coaches, it's not their fault. It's not their fault, but you can't deny the fact that all these things happen concurrently with the Browns not winning all the time. It just happens all the time, and it has happened consistently since '99, and it's not fair. And it may not even be indicative of the current health of the Cleveland Browns organization, but it's newsworthy. It's certainly something that we can talk about in relation to the Browns. I'm happy they handled their business well, and I hope that it doesn't impact them heading into the first week of the football season where they lose one of their main position coaches. But it's relevant. It has to be talked about. It's a Browns story. They hired this guy, and they handled their business well, but it's still their business. So you can't divorce this from the Browns either. So I get what you're saying, that you can't just pile this on the Browns and say that it's proof of them being garbage or whatever. But at the same time, you can't divorce it from them either. And I guess that's what I'm saying. It's really hard. It's a hard thing to figure out how to talk about, but it's relevant because this guy got suspended instantly by the Browns, and good for them. But it's also undeniably a bit of a distraction. Heading into the first game of the season, finally some actual football, and that's the one thing that can erase all this stuff. And that's what I was trying to get across yesterday when I was talking about the wide receivers. We've spent all this time talking about wide receivers and, the 52nd or 53rd player on the roster named Terrelle Pryor, over Josh Lenz, which was all over the radio yesterday. And it occurs to me that we need stuff to talk about in the preseason, but we're really wasting our time when it comes to talking about Dwayne Bowe or Josh Lenz and their preseasons, because the preseason doesn't mean a whole lot. The Browns brought in Dwayne Bowe not to prove to them what he could do in the preseason. They brought him in to try and be healthy and do what they know he's been able to do consistently in the regular season. He's something of a known quantity. That's why you bring in a free agent. And I know it's been frustrating for Browns fans to watch him struggle to stay on the field and do anything in the preseason, and it would be better if he was out there making plays and building chemistry with Josh McCown, which is really kind of funny to say. But he wasn't able to do that. But that doesn't really mean much. He's once the regular, not for a veteran. I mean, when he comes out there this week, and I assume he's going to play, and regardless of where he is on the depth chart, he's on the third team right now. That's also a non-story. If he's healthy, he's going to get out there. He's going to have a chance to run against the Jets cornerbacks, whether it's Revis or Cromartie or Buster Screen, and he's going to have a real chance to make plays. And we're finally going to see what the Browns got. And if he is a miserable disaster, if he gets hurt or whatever else, Josh Lenz or an equivalent will still be there. Maybe Terrelle Pryor steps on the field and he catches the ball and makes the defense pay. We know for a fact that Terrelle Pryor has been able to make defenses pay with the ball in his hands in the NFL. I know it's a leap to go from running quarterback to receiver who beats defenses, but we've seen him go 93 yards outrunning the entire Steelers secondary, for example. And I know that's just one play, but we know that his athleticism translates to making plays in the NFL already. And I know Josh Lenz looked like he had glue on his hands, and I know it was fun to watch him, but he's so redundant to what the Browns already have. Brian Hartline's a little bit bigger than Josh Lenz, but between Hartline, Andrew Hawkins, Taylor Gabriel, the Browns have that guy. And then you add in Travis Benjamin, who adds a different element to what Josh Lenz brings. He's got more of that top-end speed. And you've got kind of three undersized receivers, and depending on where you count Brian Hartline, who's 6'2", they've got four of that kind of medium to small-sized receiver who can catch really well underneath and runs routes professionally, quick feet, if you will. But the Dwayne Bowe, Terrelle Pryor archetype is a little bit different. Now, I think the real question in my mind, and maybe I'll be proven crazy, but the Browns, it's like a luxury. The Browns keeping a guy like Marlon Moore. You want to talk about a guy who, I don't know if he caught a pass in the last 3 or 4 years during the regular season. He's purely a specialist. And I think those guys are important. Obviously, Josh Cribbs has always been important, whether he was running gunner or returning kicks. He was a game changer at that position. And all due respect to Marlon Moore, who I think is a good specialist, a decent returner, this is where in your organization, in the development of your organization, you want to be in a position where you can have young up-and-coming players with potential for more to be your specialists. Justin Gilbert, who's been a disappointment, we would prefer to have him running back kicks at this point and using that roster spot for somebody who can contribute right away on the field during the first 3 downs and not just on 4th down when the Browns are in punt formation or receiving a punt or a kickoff or whatever else. Marlon Moore is a 28-year-old player. And again, all due respect, he's a good specialist, but specialists are a luxury. And if you've got questions at running back and wide receiver and some other positions, maybe you shouldn't afford that luxury of the specialist. And watch, he's going to have return touchdowns against the Jets. He's going to be the difference in the game, and I'm going to look like an ass. But if you want to talk about Josh Lenz and you want to say that he should make the team, don't just focus on Terrelle Pryor. There are other players up and down the Browns roster who will contribute less than Josh Lenz could in some scenario. Now, I would argue that Josh Lenz would have trouble finding the field with the Browns because he's not going to play over Hawkins, Gabriel. He's not going to play over Hartline. He's not going to play over Bowe. And how many routes, how many plays and routes are there available now once you take those guys out there? That doesn't even include passes to Duke Johnson if he's healthy, or Isaiah Crowell, and tight ends, maybe the fullback. I don't even remember the fullback's name right now, I'll be honest. But so we get so wrapped up in the preseason and the last 3 or 4 roster spots. I am interested in the last 3 or 4 roster spots when it comes to running back, because the Browns only have 2 running backs right now. But maybe they're planning on Terrelle Pryor running the ball. We'll see. If they run the ball with Terrelle Pryor, then it's going to make even more sense why they kept him as opposed to a Josh Lenz, because Josh Lenz is not going to collect the ball on a handoff or an end around or anything else. Maybe they're planning on the full on slash weapon of Terrelle Pryor. We will see. That's it for the podcast. I promise that I will keep the guests up. It was a great week of guests last week. I'm out to 2 or 3 people this week to try and be guests. It's already Wednesday, so I'm going to run out of time to get all those guests in. But I'm going to try and get at least 1 or 2 more guests this week, because I know you guys enjoy when I actually talk to other people instead of just talking to myself. But I had some thoughts. I wanted to get them down. I wanted to talk about the Browns. And so I did so. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. For WFNY podcast listeners, they're offering a 30-day free trial that includes 1 audiobook download. That's 1 out of 180,000 possible audiobooks. You need to start listening to audiobooks. You need to do it through Audible. You need to sign up with us. audibletrial.com/WFNY. audibletrial.com/WFNY. Please, please, please help us out. Sign up, try it out. And, last but not least, we brought back the 2015 ESPN Eliminator Challenge. The Waiting for Next Year Eliminator Challenge, which people were asking me to do. I don't know why people love it so much, but they do, and they wanted to do it, so I set it up real quick. If you look for WFNY 2015 on ESPN Eliminator or whatever, that's where you can find it. The super secret password is all lowercase WFNY. So you can sign up for that and have some fun with the rest of the Waiting for Next Year people who like fantasy football. And the Eliminator Challenge. I'll try and come up with a prize for that. But that's it. Go find it. Sign up. Tell a friend. Love you guys. Appreciate you listening. Talk to you next time. It's been the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast.
Waiting for Next Year.